Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Texas State Board of Examiners of Professional Counselors. Today is Friday, August 11th, 2023 at 9:10 a.m. and we're meeting today virtually over Zoom. I apologize for the delayed start. Got a lot to get to today, so we're going to jump right in it. Let's do roll call. Dr. Christopher Taylor.
Here.
Thank you, Dr. Loretta Bradley.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. I'm here.
Thank you. Dr. Leah Amuna.
I'm here.
Thank you. Jamie Stubblefield.
I am present.
Good to have you. And Ms. Vanessa Hall.
Good morning, I'm here.
And that is all that we have right now, correct?
Did you want to excuse?
I'm going to note the excused absences of Ms. Brenda Campanone and as well as the excused absence of Pastor Roy Smith. Christina, will you introduce staff, please?
Yes, good morning. My name is Christina DeLuna. I'm the board administrator for the LPC board. We also have Patrick Hyde, who is the BHEC general counsel. We have Victoria Benitez, who is one of the LPC board attorneys. And then we also have Kenneth Long, who is another LPC board attorney, as well as Tim Spear, who is the operations manager. We'll probably see Daryl Spinks in a little bit later.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. And I apologize. I neglected to introduce myself. I'm Stephen Hallbauer. I'm the board chair, public member. As I mentioned to the board, but I'm now mentioning to the public watching us today, I've used the chair discretion to move up public comment, but limited to the two individuals that are here in person to speak this morning. It's just a discretionary call on my part because I am aware of the distance that they had to travel to get here and also have to travel to get back. And so they each have 3 minutes. I'm going to pull them onto the camera so that everybody can see them. Public, this is not open public comment. This is just going to be limited to these two individuals. So please move your chair over here.
First, make it a little easier.
Yep.
Would you like me to introduce myself?
Patrick up there is going to keep track of your time. You'll be able to see it on his screen. He's the one to the right of us right there.
Yes, sir.
But you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Director, for allowing us to go a little bit sooner than normal. Good morning, board. How are y'all? My name is Cody Taylor. I drove from the Beaumont area this morning. I left about 3:30 in the morning to address y'all personally rather than on the screen. I understand that now most of y'all are remote. However, I know that your main cause today is to go over rules, regulations, and then some complaints as far as how y'all came to the decisions on that. Sorry, I'm just a little nervous this morning. I have that full entire 101 pages that y'all had for this. I also am in possession of the 136 pages that is on the LPC website under BHEC. I want to bring to something to you that is being a major issue in the state of Texas. One of the things that's been huge for us in the state of Texas is family courts. Licensed professional counselors are now being used over a multiplicity of reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is to gain leverage inside of a court system. In my case, specifically, a LPC was hired and 2 LPCs were hired as just that. It was formed, they were not a child custody evaluator. They're not appointed. They were not directed. They were individually hired. However, inside of here, I find 0 complaints or other orders of anything under 681.53. 681.53 governs a licensee from being able to make opinions or recommendations to a court. However, I have read over 50 complaints that have exactly that, yet there is being nothing done. However, I am bringing this to a question, and I ask the board to respond on this publicly. Sufficient. What is sufficient? What does the term sufficient mean whenever somebody brings to light an injustice that's been done inside of in their personal matters with their kids. Family courts were not designed to tear them apart. They were there basically as a mediation portion until there becomes obvious situations where they have to intervene. However, there's not enough people that understand 681.53. Also, the Texas Family Code 107 subchapter D and the Texas Family Code 104.008, which now has a subsection underneath that. Board, I bring a suitcase with me today of evidence that I turned over with my complaint, over 1,200 documents. Inside that document was a sworn affidavit to a recommendation that an LPC gave. My complaint was dismissed twice with insufficient evidence. So I bring to the board, what is sufficient? When I have to submit 1,200 pages in a detailed complaint, and I've reached out to numerous people, and I've noticed people that were a part of my informal hearing. However, that is not, I see the time, Mr. Stephen. However, that was not a part of their questioning. They did not ask me any questions pertinent to the complaint of my first portion. 681.53 is killing relationships and killing the time with kids and parents due to a weaponized use of LPCs. I understand that there's a ton out there that's done a great job during the pandemic and in court systems. They do great. However, there are a select few that put a very bad taste in the mouth about where we're going from there. I'll wrap up like this. I am bringing this to y'all personally. I drove 4 hours for this because my daughter was torn from me for 2 years. For 327 days, I didn't see my daughter because of an LPC. What would you do for your kid or your neighbor's kid? I'm here today to ask that somebody take a better look at what's going on into the family courts and how they're being used. Please help me, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Steps down is better.
If you'll state your name and
Whenever you're ready.
go ahead.
My name is Tim Taylor. I am a father, Cody Taylor. I am a private licensed investigator, a master peace officer in the state and retired in the state of Texas. I want you to know a little bit about my background because I can read and understand affidavits that are given in court. The first point I'd like to make is no CPS or police report has ever been filed in this case that he just described. In a divorce decree, a licensed professional counselor is supposed to, with joint management serviceship, notify a person, hey, your child is here. I want you to know that. This was never done. That to me means it's all one-sided, lopsided. On January 27, 2019, at age 5 years old, this little girl was taken to an LPC who's talked to her for 4 months and asked her over 20 times, what are you afraid of? What are you scared of? Not one time did you say her daddy. Never happened. That lady was, who knows why she was terminated. Start with the next counselor. We go into her office. The first day, what did she tell her? I'm scared of my daddy. There was 2 incidences which was mentioned throughout these interrogations and interviews with this little girl. And never did she mention the first counselor, just the second counselor. A little bit obvious in my head. I found several documents because we have the notes, the transcript, audio recorded, and testimony. 3 different things compare one counselor. There were lies, and that's the only word I know to say, lies in these. They would not appear in that trial that happened in August because they could not testify to lies. That they didn't show up. Neither one of these counselors, by the way, showed up to that trial. Things were made. One day was left out by one counselor. She left out an entire day under testimony, February the 27th, 2019, because, quote, the little girl said, this is her own words in the audio, I get mad at mommy, this is in her notes, all the time, but not at daddy. I just listen to my daddy all the time, but not my mama. Do you think the judge might have had a different opinion if he'd have saw that? I don't know. I do. I think he would have.
1 minute.
Both counselors were found to have probable cause. We don't know what. Y'all don't tell us anything. We don't know what, after all of these violations that Mr. Taylor just identified. We don't even get to listen to what they have as a rebuttal. I've never heard of this in my life. If you have somebody, they could have said, well, Mr. Cody Taylor came in with a gun, threatened to kill all of us. I don't know. We don't know anything about what they said was dismissed. Why was it dismissed after probable cause was found? It doesn't make sense to me as an investigator. It's been a year and a week since our little girl has been taken from us. The judge we had a trial, and 12 people said, we don't believe any of this documented evidence. We don't believe any of it. We're going to go back to just the way it was divorced, joint managed conservatorship. That hadn't happened. Monday morning, the judge took her away again.
Mr. Taylor, that's 3 minutes.
Sir?
That was 3 minutes.
With 3 minutes, can you go ahead and wrap up?
Okay, I am. I'm at the last page.
Okay.
That's all. That's all I have.
Anything?
All I'm wishing is somebody would adhere to rules for the state of Texas. I work for this state. I work from Governor Clemens on down. Worked for the governor's office at one time. Something has got to be adhered to as far as ethics and rules. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, board. Very much appreciate your time.
Patrick, I believe we have a rules review coming up. Yeah.
Sorry, Dr. Taylor, I didn't hear what you said.
I believe we have a rules review coming up.
Oh, he's talking about our rules meeting.
Oh, rule review. Yeah, we're scheduled in 2024 to do a rule review. So next year, all of the boards are getting rule reviews or have to be go under rule review. Yeah.
Okay, will you just make a note to ensure that we touch on the rules for subpoenas and testimony and that fun stuff?
All right, thanks everybody for your flexibility. We're going to go ahead and get back onto our regular agenda. We have item number 3, board review and possible action on 3 applications. Christina, will you present the first one, please?
Yes, the first case you all have in your packets is number A with Annette Briones de Jesus. And I do believe, yes, so she is here. So you all have all of the material in your packet. She provided some information to you all. So if you all are ready to speak with her, I can go ahead and unmute. All right, Ms. Briones, thank you for being here today. If you'd like, you have 3 minutes to verify or clarify any information.
Yes, ma'am. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just here to clarify some documentation. This happened 15 years ago. And so when I went back to look for like apartment leases or things of that nature, it was very difficult to find that documentation. The apartment that I was living in at that time in Dallas, Texas, did not have those records anymore. When these allegations came, you all mailed this notice to, I think it was my parents' house at the time. I was in Dallas, Texas. I was pregnant with my first and only child, and there were lots of complications with that pregnancy. I didn't receive the notice. I apologize for not updating my note, the address with the board. I stayed in Dallas, Texas for quite a while. There was a lot of complications with that birth. My son to this day has autoimmune issues. I have been a single mom, and since that day and that allegation, I have not had one problem with the law. That is 15 years, no DUI, no anything. My record is completely clean. I was not in El Paso at the time this happened. I did go back because I was, made aware of these allegations. I did hire an attorney, and at that time they told me it was going to take a very long time for this to go to trial, and it would be difficult for me. At that time, I had a newborn home, and to be honest with you, this license was not my priority. My son was. He is now 16 years old, and I am asking for the chance to please have this license reinstated. I have never had any issues with any of my workplaces since then. This was just something I should have addressed a lot sooner. And again, I apologize for not updating the address so that I would have been informed of these complaints and been able to address them sooner. And that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time and for listening to me.
Okay, any board discussion regarding this matter?
Mr. Chair, do you want a brief summary what the issue is in this particular case, or you? good to
Yeah,
go?
yeah, before we begin board discussion, give us a brief summary. I think everybody is, oh, I know everybody has gone through the file, but yeah, go ahead and present it, Patrick.
Yeah, just a very high level. It was this person was previously licensed with the LPC board, but was revoked. I'm trying to remember the exact date of that, back in 2007 or 2008. And the issue was she was convicted for tampering with the government record, and the government record was her license. The issue was that she was licensed in an LPC, but there was a modification made to the actual license itself, saying that she was licensed as a LSSP, a licensed specialist in school psychology, because she had applied at a school district for a job, and it was the school district that made the complaint, and also I think the criminal charge arose from that, and that's where the revocation back in 2018 took place. So that's what she is talking about, the complaint back then, and having to deal with it.
Can I address that, or am I not allowed to speak?
Sorry, let the chair decide on.
Okay.
Yeah, that would, in reviewing this matter, my first question was, why did you make this modification on your license?
I did not make that modification. Actually, I was not even in El Paso, Texas at that time. I was in Dallas, Texas. And so when I came back to, address this with an attorney, I only knew after you all had started proceedings and say that and it was said that I didn't respond, but it wasn't that I didn't respond. I never knew. I was in Dallas, Texas at the time, working for Cigna, the insurance company.
So you did not modify your license?
No, sir.
Do you believe somebody else did?
Yes, sir. In fact, I believe 2 years after that, I had issues with my taxes. Somebody else had actually profited from a tax return I was getting. And again, that's the only documentation that I was trying to find, but I couldn't get you any apartment leases. Like I said, I did send you the birth certificate of my son. The doctor that I was seeing over there, his name was Dr. Hislop. He was trying to provide me records, but it was so long ago. This was 15 years ago.
Okay, so the license that was submitted to the school district was tampered with by someone other than you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there was also an issue that PhD had been added after your name. Is that correct?
No, sir. I've never held myself out as a PhD or an LSSP.
Okay, your license was revoked back in 2008. If there was an issue that it had been fraudulently tampered with, why was this not contested back in 2008?
That was what I was saying, sir. By the time I had received notice, because that letter was sent to my parents' home in El Paso, I was in Dallas, Texas. So I came in to Dallas. From Dallas to El Paso, I had a newborn at that time who had quite a bit of complications. I actually hired an attorney to represent me that day in the El Paso court. And it was made clear that, this was not me. However, what they did is, instead of doing any type of penalty. There was no probation, there was no sentence, there was nothing. It was like, okay, you come in, we're going to dismiss these charges. So I thought that legally that was the best route to take.
You have two hands raised.
And
Pat-
if you look
Patrick-
at my record, you'll see I've never been on probation. I've never had anything there except for, I think, like the one day that I came to court in El Paso at that time.
Patrick, do you have some follow-up?
Yeah, just, there is in your materials, there is a plea agreement where she did plead guilty to, was it guilty or no contest to the offense of tampering with the government record? And did receive a judgment and sentence for that. And Christina, can you correct me? Did you obtain that document, Christina?
I did not, there was only one document that she provided to us that was a judgment and sentencing. It's on page 7 in the material for this case. This was the only document that we received.
Yeah, Christina, my question is gonna be, do we have the tampered document? I mean, where did that, obviously somebody made a complaint, but where's the document?
I don't know that we actually have the actual document, but we do have a court record of where she pled and was sentenced and found guilty for tampering with the government record. And in the indictment, it talks about that the government record is in fact the LPC license.
And so again, I'm saying, as soon as I was made aware that this was happening, I did come in from Dallas. I did have a newborn. I went in there. I had an attorney. They told me that was the best way to handle it. If you even look on some of the documents I gave you from the court, there's no sentencing, there's no probation. It says like something like time served. And that was my understanding, that I was coming in to deal with this issue that day in court. So, I mean, I guess the question would be, why now? Why 15 years later? I've been a single mom with a 15-year-old with medical complications. Honestly, this is the first time that I felt brave enough to even address this. This has caused me years of shame, years of embarrassment, having to explain this to every employer I have. And to me, it just isn't fair.
Dr. Amuna, go ahead. Take off mute, off mute.
Thank you. I'll say to Christina, to your credit, if you may or may not know, but the information you provided to us does include a plea offer that's signed by the person we're speaking with now. And it does talk about the following recommendation. It does say 1 day in CFTS. I'm not legal, so I don't know what that means, but it's signed by the defendant and the attorney for the defendant. So there is a plea offer. There is an admittance of something. And we also have a document, June 14, 2007, that is signed that indicates, I do now in open court admit to all the allegations. And that is called, I'm trying to look at it, it says Class A, Court at Law, CC7, El Paso, Texas. That's dated June 14th, that's in our file. Now, I will admit for the defendant that it is signed by her attorney. It says signed by a defendant of attorney, that I do now in open court admit to all of the allegations. It's the second paragraph of that page, if you guys have that document. It's at the top of the document, says Class A, something court at law. There's a stamp over it, state of Texas, and it has the cause number. But that second paragraph is an admission of guilt. And it's not signed by the person here. It's not signed by Miss Annette, but it is signed by it says signed by the attorney of the defendant. So I don't know if that, if your attorney signed it without consulting on your behalf.
Like I said, I was told to appear in court. I came to El Paso to appear in court. They told me that this was going to be just a matter of me going to court and, you know, presenting myself. I did that. I flew the same day. I flew out to Dallas And that was the last I heard of it. And at that point, I was more concerned about my son than I was about this licensure.
And Ms. Briones, you were represented by an attorney in this matter, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your attorney asked you, what is your explanation for the tampered license, correct?
I don't remember that, to be honest with you, sir.
Okay, but assuming that you told your attorney that the license was tampered with and it was not your doing, are you telling us that your attorney still told you to go ahead and plead to this as though you were guilty of doing so?
He did not explain to me that I was pleading to anything. What he explained to me is I had to present myself in court that day. And so I came into El Paso to present myself in court that day. He did not explain to me that that was what I was doing. What he did explain to me that is if I did not come in that day, then it was going to be a bigger issue and that we were going to have to be in court proceedings for years. And at that point, I didn't have the money or the time.
Okay, Dr. Muna, go ahead.
Just in re-reviewing there's a complainant affidavit that's been filed. I don't remember, I can't see what page it's on, Christina, but I'll make a statement and I'll give you room, Ms. Annette, to explain or just kind of comment. But at the bottom of that document, that complainant document, it says that you were once employed for SISD. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. I was never employed by SISD. At that time, I was employed for Cigna, the insurance company in Dallas.
Okay, so it says at the bottom, it says on 10/23/2006, SISD personnel confronted the defendant about the altered document and the defendant resigned the same day.
And so at that time, I was not even in the city of El Paso.
Okay, the documents page 17, I believe you, or 18. It's the facts and support. And ma'am, it says on July 5th, 2006, that you applied for a position with Socorro Independent School District, that's SISD. Did you ever apply at that school district?
No, ma'am. At that time, I was pregnant with a very difficult pregnancy, and I was in Dallas, Texas, being seen by 2 specialists.
Okay.
So you did not apply at SISD?
No, sir.
So is it your contention that someone is impersonating you that did so?
It is my contention that somebody in El Paso was using my ID. Absolutely. I've had issues with my social security number. I've had issues with the IRS. And I've done my best to clear that all up, but yes, sir.
Okay. Dr. Muna, do you have another question?
Just looking at the timeline, I'm just being familiar with ISDs. It says, the defendant applied in July 5th, which is when most people apply for positions. Summer session, people are trying to get into the new school year, but it says that the individual resigned. So they applied July 5th, 2006, and then they resigned October 23rd, 2006. So that means that that person had to have been employed for several months before the resignation. And so then it would be a matter of the possibility of an ISD system that size not doing the due diligence to confirm that the applicant is now the person who's now resigning from July to October, that someone was fraudulently employed with their ISD.
And we've had there's been several complaints with the ISDs in El Paso from El Paso ISD and Socorro ISD. There have been definitely 3 or 4 superintendents that have walked out those doors.
Dr. Taylor?
Yes, if you would clarify for me, please. So we're saying that you did not do this, you're denying these allegations, correct?
Yes, sir. I am, and I'm saying, you know
you-
what, this has been a
you-
huge
Can you
embarrassment.
help me? Can you help me please understand why you admitted to them with the court document?
Again, I don't remember admitting to that document. It was explained to me that I needed to present myself that day in El Paso, and I did so, sir, because I didn't want any issues with the law. I've never had any issues with the law.
I mean, we have contradicting facts here, and you're just denying everything, and you're saying you didn't agree to that or didn't sign that. So I guess I'm confused because it seems like either you submitted this document or somebody went radically out of their way to add a document for a job application, which I mean seems very unlikely to me. And then you admitted to it in the court case where there was a conviction. So that it was a conviction. Yes, Patrick.
Like I
So
said, sir, at that time,
And
my
pled
son,
guilty and
my
received
son was
sentence.
my son was born in May. I was in Dallas this whole time dealing with a complicated pregnancy. When I went back, this was not my priority, but what was my priority at that time was my son. So I just wanted this to be over and done with.
again, we understand your priority, okay, and I'm nobody's
And from
challenging your priority. What we're saying
no, sir. What I'm saying is
that you failed to update your records with the board, and then
yes.
you pled guilty to this event, and now you're denying that. So that's a concern for me.
No, what I'm saying today, sir,
This is not the criminal justice system. This is an administrative hearing for your license. This has nothing to do.
I
with
understand, sir, and
criminal.
it has taken me years to even have the, I guess, the gumption to even try to reinstate this license. And 15 years later, I've never had any issues with the law. This is not like I've ever had any legal issues. Sometimes when you're new to the system, it's very shocking. It's very scary. At that point, I just wanted this to be over with. I needed to think about how was I going to support this child?
Ms. Hall, we haven't heard from you. Go ahead.
Hi. I was just, as I was reading through the documentation, as a person who has had my identity stolen, identity theft, I was wondering, Miss Annette, have you gone through the process of recovering your identity, like filing a complaint and
Yes,
having
ma'am.
your identity? And did you get documentation showing that you were your identity was legally stolen
I
during
reached out
this
to
time
the
frame?
I reached out to the Social Security Department asking if they could change my Social Security number, and they told me that I could not, that they would note it because I was having issues. There was also somebody like in Baltimore using this same Social Security. The Social Security Department refused to, they say they do not reissue Social Security numbers. I reached out to the IRS. There was also issues there. So yes, I reached out to several different people. I have flags now on all my credit, on everything, alerting me if anybody's using my information.
Did you file a complaint or at least make your identity, your stolen identity, apparent to the district so that they know that whoever applied under your identification was not you?
I actually never knew who brought these charges up. So I didn't even know whether to go in there and tell them, you know what, I'm not here, I'm living in Dallas. It was never mentioned to me exactly what these allegations were or who made them. To me, when all of the letters were sent to me, it was that the board was, asking me these questions, not the school district.
Thank you.
Ms.
My,
Yeah, go ahead.
thank you, Chair Halbar. My question is along the same lines as Dr. Taylor's, because there's an indication here that you signed this and that you paid the prosecution $254. And so it's just, walk me through how you made the choice to accept this plea agreement, pay money, and understanding the, you know, the severity of what was going on. And again, we're all very sympathetic to what was happening with your child, but it's just not, I'm just not comprehending how you didn't at some point during that case say my identity's been stolen.
What happened was I received a letter at my parents' house. Actually, I think somebody came to my parents' house and they had issued a warrant for my arrest. And that's how I found out about these allegations. My parents were mortified. I was in Dallas. They called me. I actually phoned an attorney in El Paso who represented me in El Paso. I'd never met this attorney. I had only had, conversations over the phone. They said, okay, this is the date that you need to come to El Paso. At that time, my child was old enough that I could travel with him. I made the date, this is after he was born, to come into El Paso, to fly in that morning. I flew in, I went to court. He said, this is, you have to pay this fine and this is going to be over today. There's going to be, no repercussions. At that point, there was never really a conversation about how severe these allegations were. After the fact, I think that's when I started to know exactly what had happened. He had told me if I didn't want to, prolong this, if I didn't want to continue going to court and paying fees, that it would be in my best interest to, pay that fine, and it would be over that day. I would never have, any issues with this. And after that, yes, ma'am, I've had to explain this to all my employers after that.
Dr. Muna, another follow-up comment?
Yeah, I would just kind of follow along with Ms. Hall, actually, with regard to with identity being stolen. I will say that it is probably easier for me, I'll just say me, to kind of make comments as the Monday night quarterback, like after all this is said and done. So I want you to understand that I do say that with empathy. What I'm gonna say is that during that time, if you were to, during 2007, when this was going on, if you were to just send an email or a certified mail to the Social Security office saying, hey, someone's stolen my ID, if you were to send an email or even a fax to the IRS saying someone stole your ID, and you were able to put a copy of that document in your packet today, that would assist. And maybe it may or may not help today to have that knowledge, but I would just kind of implore you that, because that is a thing that does happen, it would benefit you at some point to say, here's a letter I sent to the IRS saying my identity was stolen. Here is a email that I got back for them acknowledging that XYZ has happened, because it would just assist us, at least me, in having a better perspective of what's going on.
And I appreciate that. I wish I had known that. When I was asked to submit documentation, I wasn't sure about what to submit. Again, I had called the apartment complex in Dallas, my doctor, and again, since it was 15 years ago, it was very difficult to find a paper trail. But I appreciate that. In the future, I will do that.
Go ahead, Dr. Bradley.
What I think I'm hearing you say is you don't have any documentation that you can submit to show us that you did try to, or that you have proof that you filed a complaint about your identity being stolen. Is that correct? Do you have?
No, ma'am, I do not have that documentation. Had I known you needed that, I would have, definitely submitted that. I didn't know what you all were looking for.
Suppose we said today we do need it. My question is, do you have that information?
I do have information. I even have what I could provide is the IRS records of, where my employment was at that time. I do have a letter to the Social Security Department made about that complaint.
Yeah, but Ms. Briones, we need evidence related to fraudulent tampering of your license, not IRS records, not employment records. We need, as it is right now, your statement regarding that your license was fraudulently altered, it's very conclusory, and absent any evidence of fraud related to the license, it strains credibility that that the license was fraudulently used in order to obtain employment of somebody who was going to gain employment and then continue to use your identity in their role as a fraudulent LPC.
Now, at that point, I was not a fraudulent LPC. I did have an LPC, but I was not working there. I was working at Cigna, the insurance company. There's no way I could be in two places at one time.
Yes, but ma'am, you're telling us that somebody got your license, altered it, and they were going to pretend to be you as an LPC and SISD.
I don't know what happened with that SISD. What I do know, sir, is that, if that's the documentation you're looking for, I can definitely, try to provide that. I didn't know what you all were looking for today. What I do know is in 15 years, I've never had any issues. I've never had any complaints.
Never had any complaints about what?
My professionalism, myself holding myself out, other than anything that I am and licensed to do even before then. To me, it doesn't make sense that this would not be, if this was what I was doing, it would seem like this would be a continuing thing, that you would see complaints about the licensure that I held at that time from clients, from other people. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I understand that, but there has to be, we need evidence that is relevant to the specific matter that led to this misdemeanor that you in fact pled guilty to. And
would it be possible for you? Would it be possible?
2 years of good records, that doesn't change the fact that we're not seeing anything that is anything other than just your conclusory allegation that your license and your identity was stolen, and then you went and pled guilty to that.
Again, when I presented myself in court, I didn't know what I was pleading guilty to, sir. I didn't even know exactly what the allegations were. If the board would provide me a grace period, I will definitely look for some documentation indicating that I did have issues with my identity. But today, I didn't understand what type of documentation you all wanted me to present. I tried to do the best that I could.
Brianna, if I can just add, there's multiple emails with you and we spoke on the phone many times. And I explained to you that the board members need everything related to the case, why the arrest happened or why the situation happened, what led to it. This is the first time I've heard anything about it being related to someone stealing your identity. So
Thank you, Christina.
there was nothing.
I'm ready to move forward if we can move forward with a motion.
Yes, Dr. Taylor, if you would like to make a motion, I believe that our options are to approve a full licensure with no restrictions, approve a full licensure with an eligibility order, or deny the application based on this misdemeanor. That's how I view the options on your motion, but if you want to make one, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. Sure, I would like to make a motion that we deny the application based off evidence submitted in the documents.
Okay. Is there a second to Dr. Taylor's motion?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Stubblefield. Okay, at this time, we have a motion to deny this application, and we have a second. I will allow any discussion regarding this specific motion, if anyone would like to make some.
One thing I would like to say, Mr. Chair, is that there is a growing frustration with myself. I know Ms. Stubblefield feels this, and the legal team with licensees not updating their address, their contact information. We try diligently to get a hold of them. And then they find out that there's been an action against them. And then all of a sudden they have a bunch of reasons why it was not their fault that they didn't update their address and information. So I just find that to be unfair to the public. It is the licensee's responsibility to maintain their address or information, make sure it's up to date. And I just don't find that to be a good excuse for something that's just so important. So that's just my.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, the motion is to deny Ms. Brione's application. All in favor, please raise your hand and signal so we can see it on the camera. Okay, the application is denied.
Ms. Briones, you'll be contacted by email related to next steps related to your application. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Okay, our next application is Elizabeth Davenport. Patrick, are you presenting the background on this?
I can do it also. Let me see.
Or Christina?
Yeah, I can do
Okay.
it. Let me make sure she's here real quick.
There she is.
Where's it?
Yep.
There.
Okay,
Okay.
we introduce it first.
Yes, so this is number B in your packet for Elizabeth Davenport. She has, you all have documentation from her. This is related to a past criminal history related to intoxication manslaughter with a vehicle. She has provided some letters of recommendation as well. And do any of the board members have any questions related to this case?
This came from the applications committee, correct?
This was reviewed by the applications committee, correct?
Those of you on the applications committee that are familiar with this, is there anything that you would want the board to be aware of? Things that were discussed, reasoning that you may have had? If anyone wants to. Jamie, did you have something that you wanted to kind of give us a little background on?
I think there was a bit of a split decision. My recommendation was to approve the application. This applicant did have something happen roughly 20 years ago, and they have done, according to the information they submitted, have reconciled that, have done all the treatment they need to do. They are staying clean and sober, so on and so forth. But I think maybe there was some concern by some of the other members. And so what was some of the concern possibly?
Go ahead, Dr. Bradley.
I was on that committee and I was just like Janie. I was ready to go ahead and approve, but I think that all members of the committee did not feel the same way, and therefore maybe felt they didn't have the experience to make the decision, wanted to hear more information, but I would have voted to approve.
Okay.
On what you just heard Janie say, I'm not going to repeat it, that I did look and consider what has happened, how long ago did this happen, does this person seem to have any remorse for what happened, and so forth. And so I was okay to approve it.
Okay. I'd like to hear from Ms. Davenport if she would like to speak.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elizabeth Davenport. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about what had happened and where I am now. So on January 22nd of 2005, a couple months after my 21st birthday, I was the cause of an alcohol-involved deadly car accident. I was charged with intoxication manslaughter and subsequently sentenced and spent 9.5 years in prison. I think back to my younger self and the trouble I had recognizing the big picture. I couldn't see the kind of serious consequences that would come as a result of my irresponsible decision-making. The first year I was drowning in my own self-pity, but after time and meeting more people who had suffered significantly more adversity than I had, I began to realize how fortunate I was. For I was still alive, and I promised myself that I would treat every day as if it were a gift. And I worked very, very hard in my own personal growth. And through those strides, I realized that I really wanted to become a counselor. After being released from prison, I completed all the requirements of my parole. I completed substance use treatment. I progressed through my bachelor's degree, and I got a job working at a regional MHMR. I worked full-time working at a regional MHMR throughout grad school, where I was also going to school full-time and also being a full-time mom. I've worked very, very hard to be where I am today. And today I am the program director of the mobile crisis team that covers Dallas and then 5 other surrounding counties. I supervise a team of 25 other clinicians. I have provided a letter of support from even my employer, and also with my resume to show evidence of just all the hard work that I have put into where I am today. I humbly ask for your consideration, and I thank you for your time in just considering me.
Thank you, Ms. Davenport. Board, any questions for her directly? Ms. Hall, I believe that you were part of this committee discussion as well. Any concerns or any questions that you would have for her?
I don't think I was part of the committee.
I apologize. I thought you were part of this discussion. My mistake. Got anything else that you would, go ahead, Dr. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question would just be for the board members that were on that committee. What were your impressions? I know that 2 of you wanted to approve, and then that 2 of you were uncertain. Do we know why we were uncertain? And why did we want to approve?
I think the response that I had received back from the 2 public members related to just weren't 100% comfortable making that decision at the point that they were at, and just wanted to refer it to be discussed big picture in the full board meeting.
Okay, Ms. Davenport, would you just describe 2 things for me, please? 1, what have you done to work on yourself and your mental health since the event? And 2, are you currently living a sober life? And if so, do you continue to do that?
Yes. So upon being released from prison, I was to complete what is referred to as Safe P, which is a about a 1.5 year long program that steps down from a 6-month program. You essentially are completing substance use treatment while you're still incarcerated. And then once you're released from that, you complete another 3 months at another substance use halfway house type setting. And then, so I completed that. After that, I also had to be in aftercare, which is another program through parole that included drug testing. It included going to 12-step meetings. I had to do 2 hours a week of meeting with an LCDC. For myself, I am not drinking. I don't use any illicit substances. And, that's because I feel like what I've been given is truly a gift and an opportunity. And if I were to, squander that, I feel like all of the hard work that I've made, it's, just been in vain. So today I am sober.
Thank you.
Dr. Luna, go ahead.
This is kind of for our legal egos on the board. Does the time frame from offense to application play a role with regard to how we view new applicants?
It can play a role. It's one of the factors that can be considered for it. But you definitely have on the table here the outright approve with conditions with an eligibility order, or deny the application. So you can go any of those three ways. But to your question, yes, that's the time since it's occurred is certainly a factor to be considered.
Okay, thank you. I would be.
Patrick, this is for an associate license, yes?
Correct.
Janie, go ahead.
When you're ready, I'm happy to make a motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I move that we approve the LPC associate license for Miss Davenport, and that she can begin gathering her supervision hours.
Okay, clarification, that is approve the application without any restrictions, without an eligibility order. Is that correct?
Would the eligibility order be to remain sober? Could we put that in the eligibility order, Patrick? Which I think is her plan.
Right, you could do an eligibility order. Is there a time period or specific conditions, like you want her to get certain types of treatment, or just remain sober for a certain period of
No.
time?
I believe this individual's doing that. I don't think it needs to be wrapped up with a license. They can just move forward with that professional license.
Okay, so no eligibility order.
Yeah, I'm going to remove that. Yeah. So I move that we approve the LPC associate license. This individual be under supervision for their 300,000 hours. So.
Okay, do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bradley. We have a motion for a full approval without any restrictions for the associate license. Any further discussion related to the motion? Okay, all in favor of approving Ms. Davenport's license, please raise your hand and signal aye.
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 And that is approved. Thank you, Ms. Davenport.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Okay, and we've got one more. This is Stephen Reeves. Christina, will you present this, and then we will hear from him if he is. Yeah, he's right there.
Okay, so you all have number C in your board packet material. This is for Stephen Reeves, an applicant who is also trying to obtain an LPC associate license. His was related to intoxication, manslaughter with a vehicle as well. Is that right? No, I don't think that's right. Oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong person up.
Aggravated robbery.
There you go, aggravated robbery. You guys are awesome. All right. So you all have the information there. He did provide a letter from himself as well as letters of recommendation. Also his multiple transcripts from the different continuing for the education that he continued throughout these years. Mr. Reeves, are you able to hear us?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes. You have 3 minutes to provide any new information or clarifying information.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and my name is Steve Reeves. I'm sorry, I'm plugging my battery's running low here, so I'm trying to make sure I didn't go out on y'all. Anyway, I'm very humbled here. I really don't have words to say. I've been meditating and praying and mulling over my head and practicing many, many things to say. And it's just simply this, that, I tell my clients that, and I'm an LC licensed chemical dependency counselor. And last night in group, one of the points I just remember talking about was, I try to role model to these clients how, I used to be part of the problem and now I'm part of the solution, and that, that I talked to them about legitimacy and what my definition of legitimacy was, and that was just basically going from being an antisocial person to a pro-social person. And I guess what I'm looking for today, I didn't realize it was going to get this, honestly, I didn't realize it was going to come to this point. My understanding was that I switched master's degrees, and when I got a job in this field, and I figured that counseling was apropos to, the industry I was in. And so I pursued that, and I was actually denied, and then later on interviewed and approved, and I did the work, and nobody told me that I would ever not be able to get it. But I guess the word I'm thinking about is two words that come to mind, and that's validation and mercy. And, I'm the perfect candidate for someone that's turned their life around. It was almost 30 years ago that was my final culmination of my criminal addictive history. I was raised in a criminal family in a criminal organization and trained as a criminal. And yeah, I know I teach clients against the victim stance. I'm not a victim. I was sitting in prison almost 30 years ago, just analyzing myself and evaluating myself, and says, man, is this going to be your story? Yeah, but you were raised this way, but they did this to you as a kid. And I just sat there in that prison, and I remember two words came to my mind that day, sitting in that gloomy prison cell, facing a big prison sentence. I heard the words, "Now what?" And it was almost like at that moment I grew up, and I decided, and I had a spiritual conversion. And I used to tell people in prison I was freer than I'd ever been in a free world. And I'm just looking for, validation, but I totally understand if this board decides that it's going to deny me. I respect that, but I teach the clients we can achieve. Well, you can change your life. And I just, ask for the board's mercy very humbly. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Reeves, I understand that you are on parole right now. Have you had any parole infractions?
No, sir.
And you are on parole till 2030, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what is involved as part of your parole obligations?
Thank you. At this point, I'm on probably as minimum as you can get. I just report by telephone every 3 months, or if they want me to do a UA, they call me in and I do a UA. But I did, the first part was more intensive, and I've stepped down because I've been on parole so long. But I don't get off. I'm 60 years old today, and I don't get off till I'm 67. So, I have a mantra. There's a book I read in prison called Finishing Strong, and I just want to finish strong, and, and maybe have it written on my tombstone.
Did you undertake your education with the understanding that your criminal history was a possible barrier to obtaining your license?
Absolutely not. No, sir. My first candidate plan of studies specifically said, and I was approved to go, and they knew, because I remember when I applied for the program, I had to write an essay. And I remember the first sentence, I think I wrote it in that packet. I can quote it to you today. I put, 26 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has left a sour taste in my mouth. And I wrote it like that as a hook so that whether they approved me or denied me, they were going to read that essay. You know, they were like, oh my God, this is a crazy essay. And they denied me. But 10 months later, they called me back. Dr. Sawyer said she couldn't sleep and could I come in for an interview? And I did. And I went through the program. And about halfway through my candidate plan of studies, they switched directors to Dr. Pereira. And she just asked me, had I gotten it approved with the board to get my license? I said, no, nobody told me to do that. So they said, do that. And I've got a lot of emails. I didn't know if I needed them today or maybe in the future, but where I wrote the board and asked them, and they said, well, you need to get with your university. And I asked the university, and they kept going back and forth. And then I finally got an email. And if I would have known, I can get this email. I've got it in I still got my school email address. The emails, the board, somebody from the board said, we'll finish your degree program and then we'll review your case. And I did, and we are. So that's where I'm at.
Mr. Reeves, can you clarify, was that the LCDC board or was that the LPC board?
LPC, I did not, I apologize. I'm usually very thorough at like gathering documents and stuff, but I didn't know that question was even going to come up. But no, nobody's ever asked me until, like I said, when they switched directors, and that was not even like they just told me, don't worry about it. You know, I think they were just kind of like dotting their I's and crossing their T's. And so, and I was already 30 hours in the degree plan. And then they gave me a new candidate plan of studies because my original one said Masters of Science in Clinical Mental Health with preparation for LPC, period. And then the new one that I signed about 2 years later, because I only went half time, was it said Masters of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. And I don't know why they did that or what, but nobody ever, you know, but I'm okay. I want the board to know that I totally have acceptance. I have a terrible criminal record, which I am guilty of. I was but I have not lived like that for almost 30 years now. And I don't teach that. I don't practice that, but I am totally, I believe that, if y'all will forgive me, but I'm going to, for my spiritual perspective is, I believe that God's going to put in y'all's heart my path. And if the door shuts, you know, God bless y'all. And I thank y'all for this opportunity, but I'm going to keep trying. If I deny and there's another step to appeal, I'm going to do it just to exhaust it, because I believe that's what my higher power would want me to do. And I'm just trying to finish strong and got mad respect for y'all. I'm very humbled to be in your presence. And it's amazing to me that, that there's even a possibility for me to move forward at this point.
Mr. Reeves, who is your current employer?
Taylor Recovery Centers.
And I need to just verify that that is not related, Dr. Taylor?
No, who's Dr. Taylor? Oh, no.
Okay, I just needed to verify that.
I don't know, but they are. It is owned by Christy Taylor and her husband. I don't know. I haven't met them yet.
I apologize. I just needed to.
Yeah, Christopher Taylor. Oh, that's my cousin.
And
just kidding.
Describe what you're doing right now at Taylor Recovery Centers.
Thank you, sir. Right now, I'm working the second shift doing individual sessions and process and psychoeducational groups for clients with a primary diagnosis of substance abuse disorder, severe. And most of them, you know, 90% of them have co-occurring mental health disorders. So there's a lot of, and especially at this particular place, because it's privately owned. So the clients are, I don't know, they're a little different than I've worked with in the nonprofit sector, but there's a lot of mental health, a lot of anxiety, depression, bipolar, PTSD. And, you know, there's a guy came in yesterday with schizophrenia, but I don't, you know, but I've already secured, you know, in the process of my application, Dr. Karen Haynes to be my LPC supervisor. And you have a letter of reference from her. So, I mean, I've got a list of clients I want to talk to her about, but I can't. You know,
Mr. Reeves, what would you like to do if your associate license was approved?
I would like to grow as a professional and learn more about mental health and just help people. That's the only reason I'm in this field, is to help people. And I feel like I'm a perfect candidate, because I have been diagnosed with mental health. I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I've seen psychiatrists, I've seen LPCs, I've seen substance abuse counselors. I mean, I am so counseled up, you know, I mean, it's what I do. I mean, I do it to my family. I'll do it to the guy at the supermarket if he'll let me, you know.
No.
Okay, board, it's my understanding that this was not reviewed by the applications committee, so this is our first impression on this. So while we have Mr. Reeves here, do you have questions for him?
I won't say I necessarily have a question. I will definitely commend the work that you've done post incarceration. And I will share that I'm conflicted. I will honestly admit that there's a confliction between the work that you have done, the passion for the field, and the active involvement within the justice system, in the sense that the decision would be much easier for me today if you were no longer on parole. The decision would be much easier for me, so that relationship with the criminal justice system were separated. But I will honestly say that I'm conflicted, because I do have admiration for all of the work that has already been done in our field and for yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Amuna. I do have a, you know, and I get it. I basically don't get off parole for the rest of my life. But I do have a letter from my parole officer that should be in the packet. And, you know, I'm very humbled and embarrassed actually to ask for letters of reference, you know, because people have been so kind to me and so gracious to me. And, you know, I've always along this path, and I thank you so much, Dr. Amuna, for validating my post-incarceration work. But all of my professors, all the doctors, they were just so encouraging, you know. No one has ever told me, no, you can't do this. Everybody, in fact, I used to know a guy, y'all may know him. His name is, I think, Stephen Christofferson. I think he was on the ethics board for the LPC. And I told him about my problem when I was having that problem about whether the board was going to approve me about halfway through my program. And man, he just wrote me, he's at ABC Counseling in Pasadena, Texas. He said, Steve, go for it, man. He said, I'm on the ethics board, go for it, go for it. He was just like over the top, enthusiastic, telling me, man, don't take no for an answer, you know, go. And that's just the spirit I went in. But again, I want to say I totally understand the point about the public safety. On paper, yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Amuna. You know, I don't deserve this. I don't.
I just checked.
I'm not asking for fairness. I'm just asking for mercy. And if the board decides not to give it to me, no hard feelings, no hard feelings. I'll finish. I'm comfortable. You know, I bought a home finally a few years ago. I've got a job. My wife works. I'm trying to early retire her. No problems.
I hate to interrupt, but we do need to discuss your matter here. Patrick,
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I see you raised your hand, and I was going to ask you a question. Can an eligibility order be tied to the length of the parole? As in, yes, we grant an associate's license. However, if there is a parole infraction for the duration, then that affects a lot. Can those be tied together? That's my question.
Yes, they can. And the reason why I raised my hand to hopefully maybe address part of Dr. Amuna's concern was there's a provision in Chapter 53 of the Occupation Code that talks about if a person is imprisoned or their felony community supervision is revoked and they go back to prison, we by law have to revoke a license that they have. So there is something in there, but yes, you can, and we have done eligibility orders that are tied to criminal charges that have supervision that might be for 2 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, however long it might be. Yes, we can do that. So it would just be be whatever terms the board would like to add to it. If it's quarterly reporting or making sure that they're still in good standing with their parole supervisor, or just a letter from their parole supervisor every quarter, something like that. It's for you guys to decide. But yes, we can.
Okay, and we can dictate the possible punishment as well, as in any parole infraction is an automatic suspension or is an automatic revocation. Is that correct?
If you want to include some sort of terms like that, yeah, if there's a parole violation, it needs to be reported immediately, and the licensee would be immediately suspended pending further review by the board.
Okay.
That there could be something like that, if that's what you're thinking about.
Dr. Muna, does that make you feel a little more comfortable?
Yeah, I just raised my hand. I was gonna say yes. And again, not to discredit Mr. Steve at all, but I think we have a duty and an obligation to show the public that we've done our due diligence. And I think that I would be much more comfortable saying, if we were to provide this person with an LPC contingent upon some reporting from now until the time they are no longer connected to the justice system, that would make me a little bit more comfortable. Again, if God forbid, if something were to happen in between that time and a family member or a parent or someone came up to me and said, what did you do to protect me from this person in the interim of being off of parole? I enjoy my sleep and I want to be able to sleep well at night, saying these are the measures we put in place to make sure that you were being given a quality person to the maximum of our ability by these parameters we put in place from now until the end of probation.
Okay, but Dr. Muna, you would, in order to sleep at night, you would have to be prepared for I don't care that he was on parole and y'all use that. He never should have been given this opportunity to pursue his LPC associate or to pursue full licensure. So what I'm thinking is I do want this tied to the duration of the parole in some
Yes.
form. That's what I'm thinking. That is the public member perspective is that I would want to say we view parole as an additional safeguard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay?
Agreed. And some reporting back to us regarding the status of parole would be vital, because we don't know what we don't know. And so we would need some documentation directly from parole, not from Mr. Reeves, regarding the status of behavior while on parole.
Yeah, and I also view this as case by case basis. We're not going to establish something here to where we will automatically grant licensure, associate licensure if you're on parole. It has to be a complete analysis of the specific applicant and a totality of the circumstances. And in my mind, the letters of recommendation go a long way with that additional consideration. And if he'd gotten a letter from former chair Christopherson, well, that would have been the gold standard.
Really?
Go,
Y'all know him?
Taylor.
Wow, I can probably get that. If y'all deny me, I'll do it at the last appeal or something.
Go ahead, Dr. Taylor.
Can I say one closing thing?
Reeves, if you'll wait a minute, please.
Real brief.
I do agree with Dr. Muna. However, I would prefer we do not have some reporting sit in. That's going to be very difficult for staff to manage. Also, parole that is revoked, I mean, that just results in them going back to jail, which we'll discover pretty much automatically anyways. So the reporting, I think, just creates an extra hoop. And it's also something that might not totally be under his control if you want a parole officer to send it in. And then staff has to manage that. That's a case that's going to go on indefinitely. So I'd prefer we not have that. I'm agreeing with all the other stipulations, but I don't see the value in reporting, especially he's under the fact that he's going to be an associate, still be under supervision for 3,000 hours.
Okay. Patrick or staff, is there a comparison with one of the other mental health licenses on how they've handled parole in the past, or LPC licensure in the past? Do we have anything to compare this to how we've done it in the past?
I can't think of an LPC off the top of my head, but I know at the psychology board, we've had people that were on parole and we've had them, you know, do an eligibility order and it was tied to their or their, maybe not parole, but like they were on, they got community supervision or something like that for a charge that they pled no contest. And so we did monitoring for the 2, 3 years, 4 years that they were on it through an eligibility order, and had them do reporting. So it's easy for me to talk for the compliance manager that has to manage the reporting and that sort of stuff. But yeah, because it was 7 years is obviously a very long time to do it. But we've done things like similar things like this before. So I don't think this would be out of the norm, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Board, any other comment? And if there's not, I will need a motion on this. The same options: approve with no restrictions, approve with an eligibility order, and we would need the details on that, or deny the applicant. Go ahead, Dr. Muna.
I just want to ask Ms. Hall, did you have your hand up? So I was just kind of making sure that I deferred to you. If you had your hand up earlier, we missed you.
No, thank you. Dr. Taylor actually answered my question, so I lowered my hand.
Okay. If there's no further general discussion, I will ask for a motion. And
Provide the motion, Chair.
Okay, Janie, can you specify what the motion will be?
Yes. I move that we approve the application for LPC associate with the provision that Patrick, how did you say it? That he throughout his parole does what?
That's while on parole, if any infraction would need to be reported, you know, within typically it's 30 days, but we could just say immediately. It's better to put a day period, like 30 days. Any infraction needs to be reported within 30 days. And if parole is revoked, or if any infraction occurs, he will be immediately suspended and pending further review by the board. So be brought before the board and the board can decide whether or not to take further action against him or just, you know, take him back to active status. And yeah, and if his parole is revoked, then his license will get revoked.
So moved.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, Dr. Bradley has seconded the motion. Okay, we will now, I think we'll have a little more discussion on this because of the specifics of the eligibility order. And I'm going to chime in right away and say any infraction must be reported within 7 days. I would prefer a shorter time frame. Is that practical? Okay, I would. It's just my opinion that we should move that down from 30 days to 7. But I will defer to the board's discretion on this.
Agreed on my part.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Amuna. Janie, it's your motion. Would you accept this amendment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then the motion is to approve full licensure with the eligibility. Associate licensure. Thank you, Christina. Approve the associate licensure subject for the duration of the parole order, which is gonna be about 7 more years. And then any infraction of the parole order must be reported to the board within 7 days, at which time the license would be immediately suspended. Okay. Need a second for the amended motion. Thank you, Dr. Amuna. Any further discussion? Okay, at this time, all in favor of approving the associate licensure with the eligibility conditions as stated, and Patrick will get the specifics for us, but please raise your hand so we can see. And that passes. Thank you. All right, everybody, we've been about an hour and a half in. Let's take 5-minute break and then meet me back here at 10:41. Okay, stop recording.
Stephen,
Okay, we are reconvening at 10:44 a.m. Item number 4 is possible action regarding orders executed by the board chair. Christina confirmed that we have none.
Correct, there are none.
Thank you. Item 5, report of orders from third quarter. Christina, go ahead.
Yes, we had 14 orders this time around. They are all in your board packet material. If you have any questions about those, you can let us know. Otherwise, they're already executed and good to go.
Board, any questions regarding any of the specific orders? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 6. Christina?
Yes, so in your board packet material, you have the Q3 performance measure report, the enforcement status reports, the complaint dismissal reports, and then you have both months of June and July licensing stats, which are very helpful to see how things are going. Everything's continuing to move along very well. Thankful for all of our licensing staff and the enforcement staff.
Okay. Board, any
I think, Christine, I think did Tim send out something recently about the massive reduction in legislative inquiries we've had?
Yes, absolutely. We've had a massive decrease in that. Yes.
So encouraging to see.
Yes, it's really good.
And do you have those numbers offhand by chance?
I don't. I know we were getting, Tim was getting quite a bit.
Tim's comment was that legislative inquiries have dropped from approximately 1 per day to 1 per month, I believe. So we've gone from close to, I think, 350 down to about 12 annually.
Yeah, which is just such a huge relief for staff as well, because that was such a black hole of just like circular energy that's kind of being wasted over and over again, so that's really, really good to see that. That is definitely a major indicator that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, kudos to staff on that. Item 7, we do have a STOA matter, and I believe it's going to be brought up by Mr. Long.
Yes, this was for the case of Amanda Cohn. We went to SOA and she defaulted.
Okay. Let's give her, is she here on the Zoom? Christina, will you check? Hang on, let's see if Ms. Cohn is present today.
Mm-mm. No.
No. Amanda Cohn, if you are on the Zoom and we're just not seeing you, please raise your hand. Okay. Board, any questions regarding the SOA matter? Like Mr. Long said, this was a default. The LPC did not show up for the SOA matter. So just kind of procedurally, this is a formality at this point, since there has not been any engagement from Ms. Cohn. Kenneth, anything to add on this, or?
You want me to give a brief overview of what this case was about?
If you make it brief, we're trying to monitor quorum here, but if you can make it brief, go ahead.
Yes, her license expired in 2016 and she practiced for 3 years without a license is what the allegation was, all the way until she was caught in 2019. And and she was also, when it expired, at the time she was an LPC associate, and so she was practicing all this time also in addition to with an expired license without an LPC supervisor, which is another issue. And we've been asking for engagement with her for years. We've sent her numerous correspondence to not only her address on file with us, but all the historical addresses on file, and she has never responded to this investigation at all. So we asked for revocation at SOA, and she just defaulted. So now we're here.
And our decision is whether we agree with the SOA recommendation or we just are voting to revoke and the SOA matter is outside of our consideration. Patrick, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there's a proposed order that Kenneth has prepared for you, and so the order would be to recommend this order to the council for their meeting. So SOA doesn't actually make any findings, they just default it back to the agency when they don't show up. So there's not a proposal for a decision, there's just an order from SOA that's a remand back to the agency.
Okay, so any recommendation or any motion is going to be that we will recommend to BHEC, to Chair Canseco, that Ms. Cohn's license be revoked.
Right, and that proposed order is in your packet.
Got it. Okay, I do need a motion on this.
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And Janie has seconded the motion. All in favor that we recommend that Ms. Cohn's license be revoked, please raise your hand and signal aye.
Aye.
Okay, recommendation passes. Kenneth, thank you for your work on that. Agenda item number 8. This is remaining on our agenda. I don't know if we have any specific updates. This is related to streamlined recommendations for streamlining as a result of the Uvalde report. Staff, is there any updates on where things stand on that? I know a lot of our desire was related, or where we thought the greatest benefit in streamlining our processes was part of the counseling compact. We thought that would be most beneficial, and so we'll discuss that momentarily. But if there's anything related or outside of the compact, Patrick, can you fill us in?
Well, this was Dr. Taylor had mentioned a question about the 5-year exam requirement. So this would be somewhere where if the board would like to, or if Dr. Taylor would like to, we could send that to the Rules Committee to bring back a proposed rule that takes away the 5-year requirement and just says, you pass it, you passed it, much like what psychology does with the EPPP.
Okay. Board, anything to add? Dr. Taylor, you had suggested that. Any comment that you want to make on it?
Yeah, similar to what we've done with the academic degree, the fact that your credits don't expire and that your education doesn't expire. We removed that rule several years ago, even before the Uvalde report. I think this is another step that makes a lot of logical sense. If an individual has graduated from a master's degree program and then 15 years later, they can sit down and pass the NCE. I say, way to go, man, good job. Or if they pass it right out of grad school, good for them. I don't see a lot of value in putting a time limit on it. But of course, that's open for discussion, and others might disagree. But it seems to work out for our fellow mental health professionals at psychology, and I know the LMFTs and the social workers are looking at that as well. And I think we're going to put that up on the next standardization committee discussion at BHEC at some point in the near future as well. So,
okay. Janie, go ahead.
I just wanted to make comment. Dr. Bradley and I had the opportunity to go to the Counseling Regulatory Board's annual summit. And so one of the things under this section that we were tasked is that they want us to look for opportunities to bring more people into the profession and things like that, streamline our application, et cetera, et cetera. And so many other states are, of course, our legislation has not given us that opportunity to join that counseling compact as yet, but to look at reciprocity laws, maybe specifically for military families, or bilateral reciprocity agreements, some of those types of things. And so I just wanted to make a note that and I don't know, Patrick, if this is going to be your team to be looking at what codes are available, or what other avenues maybe we could begin to look at. And so just wanted to kind of say, hey, let's start to put that on somebody's particular file.
And I certainly agree. When we were at the meeting, excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold this morning. When we were at the meeting, one of the things we heard, 29 states have joined the compact. And I bet it's 30 today because there was one state that it was on the governor's desk. And this, you know, I guess we won't have a chance for another 2 years. So.
And I guess what I'm saying is maybe looking at, are there multiple paths to licensure? So not, you know, looking at the path that we currently have, and we know that the compact is not going to be accessible at least for another 2 years, but maybe to identify, are there other paths that we should consider?
Patrick, go ahead.
Just to answer Ms. Stubblefield's questions, the reciprocity, the true reciprocity, unfortunately, that would require a statutory change. There was a proposed reciprocity statutory change to be made in one of the House bills that unfortunately did not pass. So had that passed, it was to give all the boards reciprocity, the ability to enter into reciprocity agreements. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait for another legislative session. BHEC has the military rules that would allow for, you know, ways that military people can get licensed sort of in a more streamlined process. And there is a proposed change to one of those right now, being that had gone out for proposal. And I think BHEC's looking at potentially adopting the next meeting. But those are maybe some things that you can maybe look at. Some of the LPC rules. There's one LPC rule that deals with that, and so that could be something that if you'd like to send to a rules committee. The other thing where you could sort of create reciprocity without actually true reciprocity is one of the things, and maybe Christina, you can correct me if I'm wrong with licensing staff can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the ways that people get hung up that isn't necessarily in the statute is the coursework requirements. And so we could go back and look at the coursework rule and say, you know, is there a way we can consolidate those or make them in a more streamlined fashion? I think, was it the model compact language that all the states adopted had listed coursework requirements, and that was modeled after I'm trying to remember which model act it was after, but that's something we could look at that model act and our rule requirements and see, can we make those a little bit more synced up? Because I believe that model act is sort of what other states do. So that way, if you have somebody with coursework from another state, it's easier to make them mesh together when they try to come in as a licensee. So it's not true reciprocity, but it streamlines that process for them.
Okay. Anything else to add? I don't think that we have any action items coming out of this. At this point, I am intending to leave this item on future agendas. So it's going to be something that we're constantly looking at. Okay, but we'll go ahead and move forward. Number 9, that's our rules that Dr. Taylor originally proposed regarding our concerns over informed consent. Those were approved by BHEC, and now they are sent back down to us for consideration for adoption. They were published in the Texas Register, and we have received public comment. Before we get into the non-substantive changes that have been brought to our attention by the governor's office, board members, anything you would want to address based on what you received in the written public comments on this? My assessment of it is that there's, people are generally in favor of it. There seems to be some confusion about why it's necessary. And I just, if we could just take a couple minutes, and Dr. Taylor, this has been your child from the beginning. If you could just kind of briefly explain what we were trying to do and how we believe that this addresses the concern that you were brought up, because I think the confusion is, what does this exactly accomplish? And so if you don't mind, just a kind of a brief explanation of why you came up with this and what we tried to do. And at that point, I'll hand it over. We did have a couple non-substantive changes from the governor's office. We'll get into those right after that. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief, as we've discussed this many times now. Really, essentially, the idea came out of the confusion from a lot of LPCs concerned with their current roles of employment as the field moves more into an employee model and less of an independent contractor model. We see more companies moving into the space, and so more and more therapists are now employees. We have rules that safeguard that for record keeping. However, the way the rule is currently written, informed consent is sort of left out of that. So a lot of these LPCs were concerned about their liability or their responsibility to inform consent that they don't necessarily have to address some of the confusion. We're really not changing a whole lot in the rule. Our amazing legal team took this opportunity to break down the rules to make them a little bit more clear. I think that might have driven some of the confusion of, one of the comments being this creates an informed consent document that's multiple pages in length. We're not adding anything new. We were just basically changing a little bit of the language, saying that, the LPC is not necessarily the one that's directly responsible if they work at an agency or a company. So it's really was designed to just kind of complement the existing rule for records. We were just sort of adding that to the informed consent and took that moment to do what we've done in the past, which is make the rule a little bit more broken out and cleaner to understand.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Hey, Patrick, can you give everybody a heads up on what came out of the review by the governor's office and what changes they had?
Sure. Christina, do you want to do a share? Thank you very much for a share screen. So right here in the yellow, if you scroll down in 3 and I think 4, it also, those were, so the underlying portion is what was proposed, and that's what's in the current rule, and it was moved over here. And so they wanted to delete that part and just say upon written request, because I don't know, I'm trying to think in 611, they just didn't feel like it was necessary, and it's, I don't know, there is, chapter 611 does create a statutory right for a client to those records, but I don't know that there's necessarily a provision in there that says that they have to give a written explanation in plain language. And so that, I think they just wanted that. They didn't want to change the actual what was required by the rule. They just wanted to take out the reference to chapter 611 because they didn't feel like it was necessary or maybe accurate. So I didn't feel the need to initially change the rules because we weren't looking to make edits for those purposes. We were just looking to restructure the rules to make them easier to read. And 5, yeah, it wasn't 4, it was 5. They basically just moved that. To me, it's just sort of a grammatical change because it still does the same thing. They just removed that beginning part and basically made it a separate sentence at the end to still say, for unkept appointments, there can be, you can't submit a bill for those. It just, to me, that's a wordsmithing issue. Didn't really, again, doesn't substantively change it. The standard is still the same. That's just that's how they wanted the rule to read. But
okay, and since these are non-substantive, we can still vote on whether to adopt today, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Taylor, the father of this rule, any issue with the OOG's office?
No, I don't, but see, I really want to just drive home. We just made a comment about this. This is not like a master plan or anything. So don't consider myself like the father of some big movement here. We're literally just changing a little bit of wording and one rule. So as much as I appreciate that, but
No,
yeah,
I have liked this one from the beginning because I felt like we were being proactive and we were kind of anticipating an issue and we were getting out ahead of it and we were doing something that I believe was in the interest of our Texas LPCs. I've always liked this, and I'm glad that we're to this point and pretty close to the finish line. So someone's got their hand raised. Is that Janie? Yeah, go ahead, Janie.
Sir, so I just wanted to highlight, and this is based on some of the comments that we were provided, is we're not trying to make it more difficult. We're actually trying to make it easier to say that, like, if you're not in control of those documents, just verbally make sure you're advising your clients and note it in your case note. So this is really more options for you to make sure you're following and you're complying with the rules, not adding additional stuff. So.
Absolutely. Good point, Janie. Guys, any further discussion on this? It's always exciting when we get right here to the finish line. I need a motion on whether we adopt the new rules. Anyone?
I move we adopt the new rules so Dr. Taylor doesn't have to keep his name on there.
I second. So Janie doesn't have to always second.
Okay, and I will read it so it is official. The motion is to adopt the new 681-35, 681-36, 681-37, and 681-38, as well as the amended 681-41, 681-52, and 681-205. We do have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding the motion?
no, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's worked on this. I think I literally just asked Patrick in a meeting if we could like delete 4 words, and this is what we got. So thank you for that, Patrick, and thank you for everybody else. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. All in favor of adopting the new rules and the amended rules, please raise your hand. Signify aye.
Aye.
And the rules pass. Thanks, everybody. Moving on to agenda item 10. 10A is our Rules Committee report, and the gist of this is the result of our discussion regarding the feasibility, the pros and cons of being able to add PhD credentials to a license. After the client or after the LPC has received their license, they have their master's, they go back and they get their doctorate. Can we add PhD to those licenses? We have begun discussion on this. We had a Rules Committee meeting back on May 16th, following our last April LPC board meeting. And what came out of that is staff indicated that they do have the capability to do this. They can add PhD credentials to a license. We discussed pros and cons of that, and we'll get into that. But what the committee decided was that we would recommend a $54 fee in order to have this done. That's the same as a license upgrade. And in anticipation of an initial rush to do this, we were going to give staff the leeway to give a disclaimer that there was no time frame that they had, there was no deadline for the staff in order to get this done, and that just our agreed upon time frame was a recommendation to anybody doing this, that this possibly could take up to 6 months to process, and it's not a deadline. The reason for this length of time, it gets to really the heart of the concerns about this, and that's the fact that this is not, for staff, this is not essential. This is not crucial for licensure. This is outside of their primary scope. It's it's additional work for them. And there will be some work involved, primarily on determining whether the PhD that's been submitted is counseling or counseling related. It will take some analysis and some staff time. And again, the concern from here in Austin is that this doesn't have anything to do with granting a license to practice. And that is that's a concern that we've heard. Staff has to balance 4 mental health boards, and there is the concern that you start granting these non-mission critical requests by the board, then crucial time gets taken up by people that are getting pulled off of mission critical objectives, reviewing and approving licenses. We have done since the transition to BHEC, they've done an outstanding job to getting approval times down, to getting complaints time down. And since all those timeframes have declined, there's concern that we lose those gains, that once we start approving this item for LPCs, and then we're approving this item for LMFTs, and then it's the death by 1,000 cuts. So all of a sudden we're doing all these tasks and we're getting tied up, and we're getting drawn off of the essential responsibilities of the staff here in Austin. That's the big concern. That's a legitimate concern. I don't roll my eyes at that one when they explain it to me. I get it. But the other side is I believe that this is a very important thing for our members. I think that you go through the rigmarole, the challenge, the time, the effort to get your PhD. You would like to be able to reflect that accomplishment, as well as the credentials and level of expertise that comes with it. You would like that reflected on your license. So I view the $54 fee, the no time frame obligation to get this done, I view that as kind of the compromise on this. Because if I had my way, we would do this for free and you'd get it within a week, because I am all for people that get all the way to that PhD. It's quite an accomplishment, and we should celebrate those people. We do not have a good read on how many we don't have a good read on how many people would apply for this. There's not good numbers. If anyone has found data on how many of our LPCs have their doctorate and would like this, I'd like to hear it today. But that's laying out the pros and cons. I think that our professional members are very much in favor of this, and I understand that. Personally, I think it's a good idea. I like that that we should be celebrating. We should be there's benefit in PhD up there on the wall on the license, it's part of just it's good client care, because they are aware that this person really is an expert. They got all the way to where there is a doctor in front of their names. So that's my soapbox spiel. We're going to open it up for discussion now. Rules Committee members that have been part of this, chime in on anything that I forgot from our committee meeting. Dr. Taylor, anything to add?
No, that sums it up, Mr. Chair.
Janie Stubblefield, as somebody who this will affect once we get that dissertation done, how do you feel about it?
And thank you, Chair Halbauer. Unfortunately, it will not affect me because I'm not working on a PhD. I'm working on a doctorate in ministry. But the comment I wanted to say has to do with the fee. The discussion around that is because there will be administrative hours involved. I don't want our licensees to think, oh, they're just, money hungry, things like that. All they got to do is go in and change 3 letters. That's not it at all. That there has to be a verification of the degree and that it is directly related to this field, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some administrative hours involved, and that's where that fee discussion came in. And so just want people to understand that that it wasn't just, another way to get some money from you. That wasn't the goal at all. It was, we're really looking at how can we make this avenue possible for those who have accomplished this level of in our field, and to recognize that for them. So that's all I wanted to comment. But I think a lot of good work. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you, Chair Halbauer, everybody who worked on that.
And Janie, on that, when we're talking about staff, I would say too, is, assuming that this goes through, I would like to encourage all of our licensees who have doctorates to please bear with us. My assumption is going to be that there's probably about 3,000 to 6,000 LPCs that would qualify for this. And, if you all submit that application at once, it's going to be a rough day for staff. So, it'd be a great payday, right? It's going to be a rough day. So if we can just, bear in mind with that, I think after about 6 to 12 months, that'll kind of level off, and then it'll be more of a trickle in and be a lot more easier to manage. But we definitely want to make sure that this process does not get in the way of current licensure. Does not get in the way of associate upgrades. It's not get in the way of complaints. It's not get in the way of investigations. We definitely want to keep those legislative inquiries going down, and we don't want this to increase those. So if this creates a problem, staff will definitely put it on the back burner, slow it down a little bit. So please bear with us assuming this gets rolled out.
Yeah. And Dr. Taylor, I think it's also important that we emphasize this. It can't be any doctorate in anything. It has to be a doctorate specific to this counseling LPC license. That's all that's going to qualify.
Dr. Muna, go ahead.
I'll yield to Patrick because his hand was up first, and then I'll go after him.
Oh, Patrick's going to bring all the doom and gloom. Let's get the good stuff out first. Dr.
Okay.
Bradley, what about you?
At that point, I'm just gonna co-sign on Jamie. As a person whose PhD is medical related and not counseling related, I also want to kind of co-sign on the fact that having individuals, at least have the board or staff state that this does not relate to just any PhD in anything, just to prevent complaints or potential complaints and issues with our staff, who we are humbly and so grateful for, that it has to relate to counseling, it has to relate to the licensure, so that we're not having too many public comments or complaints or issues, wondering why their PhD was not added. And I think as explicit as we can be in the beginning, it will help on the back end. With regard to letting people understand what the criteria is. And so Janie, thank you for saying that $54 is not just $54, that there's a lot of labor with regard to, if anything, making sure that the degree is accredited properly. Not just being in the field, but I would imagine that it would have the same level of accreditation that we require for our master's degree for licensure as well.
Dr. Muna, that's a great point. And I view it as part of, we are protecting the public, because if the therapist introduces themselves as Dr. So-and-so, but then the client is in the office and PhD is not up there on the license, there's some, I thought you were a doctor. Well, actually my doctorate is in this. The public is more informed based on that discussion, which ordinarily may not have come up. So I view that as another pro for this change. So, Dr. Bradley, anything you had to add? I remember from April that you're pretty for this.
Oh, I definitely am for this, and I certainly applaud you all for bringing this forth this quickly. I seem to have ended up with a summer cold, so I'm sorry about my voice. But I think it's a great thing. I think it's also in the best interest of the clients that we serve. But I think it's going to help persons in private practice, for example, too, especially those that receive reimbursements from insurance, for example, third-party payments. I was calculating up before our April meeting. I think for some people that this could make the difference, $30,000-$40,000 in their annual income. And this is just an estimate. So I think, first of all, we have to see it as a big benefit for the clients. But I also think it's a benefit for our licensees. So I'm in full support.
Okay, that's good. Vanessa, go ahead. Off mute. Vanessa, off mute. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, will the members know that's pursuing a PhD? Will they know on the front end which degrees are eligible versus those that are not? Like similarly to the master's level?
Yes, we saw that. That's all laid out in the rules currently.
Okay.
So licensees are already allowed to do that through marketing and advertisement. We just don't have a mechanism to put it on the license. So that's all that's changing. That is already predefined.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna hand it over to Patrick. His objective, he's got to play bad guy a little bit, but he does, he's gonna speak for staff combined on making sure that we completely understand the ramifications of this change would have for them. So Patrick, have at it.
So to rain on the parade, some of the points I just wanted to make were, in order to do this will require some rule changes, and some of them are going to be BHEC rule changes. For example, if we're going to charge a fee, it has to be in the fee rule, and the fee rule is a BHEC rule. It's 885.1. So if we're going to start charging them money, we need to add it to that particular rule. So I know this has been added to the BHEC agenda next week. So it will be something that's discussed at BHEC on Tuesday. So that's one instance where we will have to add that, make a rule change if we're going to start charging people for different types of if we're charging people, essentially it needs to be added to our fee rule. There will also probably need to be possibly some an LPC and also a BHEC rule change, because I know that at HHSC, part of the discussion previously was that at HHSC, this was done sort of under a name change. And so there's not really, the BHEC rule on name change doesn't really address this. And so for that process, so it'll be something that'll need to be added and developed, and essentially to address a lot of the concerns you're talking about, where people are saying, is this rule related to counseling? So can we add it? That's sort of something that I think really needs to be clarified in the rule, because the current LPC rules only talk to the under the advertising rule. They talk about allowing the use of an LPC license, allowing an LPC licensee to use their doctoral degree if it's related to counseling, and so they can announce that. But it doesn't really speak to the adding it to a actual license, like wall hanging license. So there will need to be, if we're going to move forward with this, we will need to do some minor tweaks here and there just to make this happen. So I know that's me raining on the parade, but it's just to be clear. I don't think that we can just, tomorrow start doing this. We'll also have to have an application, some sort of application developed that people can fill out and then submit. They need to submit their transcripts to us the same way they do when they submit their licensure, and it's going to have to come from that university. So again, there's those sorts of processes put in place, because that was one of the issues, is this isn't like with the name change, people can go in and just do it themselves. They don't, that doesn't actually take staff time to actually do that, but this will take staff time to review and make sure, is this a counseling related doctoral degree? So there will be, staff time used for that. And that's one of the big concerns, is that I feel like we're starting to get very efficient in the way that we're processing things. And so we don't want to ruin that efficiency with doing other things where we've already issued a license. And so the mission critical part was getting that person the actual license. And then now we're just modifying what's on the license. It doesn't change the fact that we've already allowed them to get licensed and already start providing services to the citizens of Texas. So that's sort of, we hope, as Chair Halbauer put it, we don't want to die by 1,000 cuts, where we're doing things that don't move the mission critical stuff forward. And that's staff's big concern about it.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Muna.
Would it matter or benefit at all if after the process was said and done, there's a statement that said, because your license is already current and valid, we will not mail this out to you, but you can go in and print it out for yourself?
I don't know that we allow people, I think we actually have to mail it to them because we don't want people accessing the system and then printing out fake copies, right? Like we don't, I think there's a specific, I don't know the exact way that this is done. Christina, maybe you know better the mechanism that licensing does this, but I think it gets mailed from us. They don't get to go in and say, I want to download this, because if they ever ask for a duplicate license, that's a fee. That's actually on the fee schedule. They say, my license was lost in a flood. I need a new one. They then submit a form, pay us a fee, and we mail them the actual license. I know each board does, I think does it that way, but Christina.
Yes. For the certificate, if you want the actual certificate, you will have to, that does come from us. You pay for it and we'll send the new certificate out. But if you just want the verification with the information, that's something they can print from online.
And that's what I was suggesting with regard to, thank you, Christina, the verification. And again, I will keep my hand out of staff work. But if there's a possibility of, with this, and I'm just, forgive the language, but I'm thinking of like vanity license plate option. Instead of having to send out a mailed version, that it is updated, that it is in the system, and they can verify it and print out an online verification instead of staff having to mail out the official copy to them.
Yeah, it'll be up to really the licensee. If they want the certificate, they'll have to get it print, mail in the or complete the online application, pay the fee, and then we can send them the certificate, which I think if they're doing it for insurance stuff, my understanding is that they need the actual certificate, but I'm just assuming that. But otherwise, if the information is there and they can find it on the verification, they can use that as well.
Patrick, are y'all comfortable with what I'm terming the time frame disclaimer, as in this may, please understand that this may take up to 6 months because of initial interest in this. Are y'all comfortable with that 6 months? I mean, we're not even committing to that. It's just kind of saying this is the expected time frame.
I understand what you're saying, and it's difficult for me to say without knowing, how many applications are going to come in, and then people having to prioritize the current applications that they're having coming in. I think your point is well received, in that you're saying these are going to take second priority, and it may take longer to process these. But to give you an actual firm commitment on 6 months would be perfect. Honestly, it's hard for, I'm not the one processing the application, so it's hard for me to speak for them and say yeah, they can get it done in 5 or 6, because also, again, we don't even know what this will look like how many we'll get and that sort of stuff. So, but the point's it's a good point that we're going to prioritize the initial licensure applications ahead of those, so.
Yeah,
I'm trying to find some sort of what action the board can take that provides you with some cover against. Why is this taking so long? I paid my fee 5 months ago. Where is it? But go ahead, Dr. Moon.
Did we have any verbiage from the COVID era with regard to potential delays because of COVID? Is there legal verbiage that we use that we might can tweak with this new proposal? You know, due to mitigating circumstances, due to this being a new task, there will be delays up to and exceeding 6 months. And by completing your application somewhere at the bottom, you sign and acknowledge that this may be a possibility. So they're doing that on the very front end of applying for the application.
I could see either Tim or Daryl or Patrick, all of us kind of working together and finding something, if that's something that comes up and becomes an issue. I can see us putting something out there so that, you know, someone applying already has that understanding or idea of what that processing time would look like. I just feel like right now it's a little bit too early. So maybe once we start that process, and again, we have a rule change, you know, if this is going to be take a little bit of time on getting the process going. But that's a very good point, to maybe have something already out there for the applicants or the person applying for the PhD to be added, to have that information. So I think that's something we'll definitely take back with us.
Yeah, I think the verbiage will stay, you have your doctorate, you understand that sometimes these things can take a while. All right, guys, board, anything else to add? We need to vote on, let's see, I think that we want to, basically the vote is, do we want to proceed with moving ahead to direct staff? We want them to be able to add the PhD credentials. It's a $54 fee, and there is a non-committal time frame on how long they have to do it. I mean, if we vote to approve that today, it gets discussed on Tuesday at the BHEC level. Dr. Bradley, go ahead.
Are you ready for a motion? I will so move.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bradley. Do I have a second? Dr. Taylor with the second. All right, is there any further discussion regarding the specific motion? It's the yes, we are going to direct staff that we would like to do this. It will be a $54 fee, and we have a guideline for the time frame, but not a rule, and that can still be subject to a little bit of tweaking. That's the motion. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify aye.
Aye.
Aye, and motion passes. Thanks, everybody. Christina, Applications Committee, anything to add other to what we've already done?
Yes, just to provide an update. So I just wanted to let you all know that the Applications Committee did review one case back in April. And then the case that was heard today did go to committee, but again, was referred to full board. So they continue to review items, and not just application cases, but just wanted to let you all know those are actions that they have done since this meeting.
Thank you, Christina. Item 11 is the board chair report. Board members, as well as public watching us live or on the recording. I now have moved to doing a written summary of my board chair report. And what I would like to do moving forward is just, I'm not going to sit here and read it verbatim, but I would like to point out a couple of things where I think are important, or where I am interested in hearing some discussion from our members, and occasionally some recognition of outstanding work by staff or by our members. Item 1 on there is the status of the Interstate Counseling Compact. Frankly, we put a lot of work into that. We're disappointed, I think is the best way to, we're disappointed that it did not pass during the legislative session. that being said, I would like to thank everybody that did some work on our efforts towards that. We drafted a resolution in support of board members in their capacity as regular citizens of Texas and as just concerned Texans did advocacy work. It's disappointing, but at this point, I've kind of settled in the position that it wasn't meant to be. It kind of got caught up in some of the end of the session politics. But what we're going to do is learn from it and find value in the overall experience. And then we will do what we can in 2 years. We're limited because of our role as a board. However, steps can be taken, especially in your personal capacity, towards kind of shifting the tide, so to speak, so that there's more support for this during the 2025 session. I think you're well aware, but the bill did pass the House. It only had 1 vote against it. But then the bill did not get out of a Senate committee. And so, you know, that's where the stop sign was. And ideally, let's get past that stop sign next session. So again, thanks to everybody who did put work into this. It's disappointing, but it's not as though we are just going to give up and not try again. Like Dr. Bradley mentioned, it's her belief that 30 states have adopted this compact. So we will keep trying again. July 19th, Christina, Tim, Patrick, and Daryl hosted an Insights over the lunch hour. Lots of good questions, legislative update, rule changes. Thank you to them for hosting that. I counted, or I looked on the counter, and at one point there was over 500 people watching it. I will ask both Dr. Bradley and Janie for any sort of updates they brought back with them from the NBCC summit 3 weeks ago. Personally, thank you for attending that, and I'm just going to hand it to you for a second. If you have anything that you would like to comment on from what you guys learned or what you're hearing, that's a very boots on the ground type of experience. So let's hear how it went. Janie, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair Harbar, and thank you for the opportunity. The Counseling Regulatory Board Summit was refreshing, and it's really nice to be able to sit with the boards across all of the states and hear that some of the things that we're discussing are being discussed in really most of the states. Many of them are very excited to be participating in that counseling compact. And so all I would say is to all of our licensees is please get in touch with your representatives. We've just got to get a louder voice that we're able to communicate to our legislators the importance of this. I mean, we all, you know, on one of our agenda items, our legislators are saying, what are y'all going to do to resolve the mental health crisis? And we come to this and they tie our hands. And so we've got to get them to understand that we're doing what we can. Looking for those multiple paths to licensure, as we mentioned earlier, and what we can do that. A couple of the things that stood out for me is hearing how the licensing exams are validated. That was very encouraging to me, the rigorous process that the NCE and the NCMHCE, very glad I could say all of those alphabet letters at one time. I'll confess, I have them written in front of me. And Christina, I typed out my notes and sent them to you, so you have all those. But the rigorous process that those exams are put through for validation, that was very encouraging to me. as a licensing board, to understand that step that we require of licensees is such an important step in confirming their knowledge in the field. I don't know, in terms of, kind of my final thought is I really wish that we had more licensees directly participating, like attending our board meetings. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 licensees. And I think there's maybe 40 or 50 on our call today. And we're discussing some pretty important rule changes. And so was one of the critical topics that we discussed, is having engagement in the profession. And that by being directly engaged, like those of you who are here today, man, I applaud you. You took the time to be here and you're hearing the discussion. And I do believe that you are much less likely to ever have any kind of an ethical issue, because you're hearing the information directly and it's not second, third, or 15th generation information. And so just want to applaud you, but want to say, hey, if we can encourage your friends and professional colleagues to also participate, I think that would be really, really important. So that's my comment. Dr. Bradley?
I also am very happy, and thank you all for allowing us to attend. It was a good conference. I think it was well organized. And some of the things I took from the meeting that I thought you all might be interested in, they had a research study in which they said 80% of the disciplinary cases involve friendships, non-therapeutic texting, social media issues. And I think if I recall that, they were talking about be careful, don't become a friend with a client and so forth. Then of course, sex with clients was mentioned, and dual relationships. There was a keynote speaker that talked about the universal licensure recognition, ULR. That was a term that I knew a little something about, but wasn't really that familiar. And she was assuring us that the URLs will not wipe out the counseling compact. She said the two are different pathways. And I thought, Chair Hallbauer, you might want to be more aware, and the rest of the board, of the URL. I knew a little something about it, but not that much. They talked a lot about the counseling compact. They stressed that compacts do represent mobility. It's a good recruitment tool for states to be a part of that compact, in that it brings new people into the state and allows our licensees to service in other localities. They talked about the new code of ethics for the NBCC. NBC has a new code of ethics, and they also talked about the trends and ethical violations. They indicated these include sexual relationships, imposing values on clients, working outside the scope of practice, dual mutual relationships, breach of confidentiality, unethical billing, and client abandonment. So we did get quite a bit of ethical violation discussion. So those are the main things from my notes. And again, it was a very good conference. So thank you.
Well, thank you to both of you for going and for representing us. So we appreciate that. That's kind of like bonus work. And we're grateful that you two went and represented us. And speaking of bonus work, number 4 on my report here, Janie, congratulations. If you haven't heard, Janie was appointed by the BHEC chair, Ms. Gloria Canseco, to a new Children's Mental Health Strategic Plan Subcommittee. And Janie is going to represent all four of the behavioral health boards. And again, grateful that you're stepping up to do additional work. We know you will not only represent LPCs very thoroughly, but on the bigger picture on all the mental health boards. Has there been any news on that yet? Have they met?
So the committee has just met for its initial committee meeting with just a lot of introductions and things like that. And so just setting in place, you know, upcoming schedules and things like that. So it's just been the introductory meeting so far.
Okay. You think it's going to be a good group?
Very much looking forward to participating with this group. It is a large group. And so I think that will be interesting to see how we're able to come together. And the purpose is to produce a document for the legislation to have a clear path for services for children and kids, especially identifying any gaps in services. And then I think there's going to, you know, possibly be asking for money for how to fill those gaps and making sure that we're covering the state of Texas more thoroughly in terms of mental health services for children.
Fantastic. Again, thank you for being willing to serve in that role. BHEC is going to meet on this Tuesday. At that point, they will consider the PhD credential additions that we just passed here in our meeting. Dr. Taylor and I will be present at that meeting, and we will make the case for that addition. Previous BHEC meeting was back on May 23rd. We didn't have any LPC rules at the time. One thing I did want to point out to you is that there is some consideration for a CE tracking system. They've begun initial discussion on that. Somehow I became the guy who's very skeptical about this, and not really intentionally, but I was just kind of asking questions about it. And I'll continue to ask questions about it to see if it's going to be feasible. But you should be aware that those are BHEC level issues that are being considered. So watch on Tuesday if you have the opportunity. And let's see, finally, we did have a date set for our LPC board panel discussion. It's going to be November 2nd at the TCA Professional Growth Conference, 12:30 to 2 o'clock p.m. That is in Houston. Those of you who I know live in the Houston area, I will probably be contacting Vanessa, wink, wink, about whether you would like to participate on the board panel. And I know that some of you just always go to it regardless. So we will put together a non-quorum violating number of members to, again, attend TCA, serve on that panel, answer questions, and present up-to-date information on changes that we've made, changes that we're considering, and of course, industry trends that we're paying attention to. Okay, and that does it for my board chair report. So, Christina, the administrator report.
Yes, all right. So same kind of thing. Staff are continuing to get high volume of phone calls and emails. Contact form is working great. So please go ahead and continue to submit your inquiries that way. It just ensures that your questions are going to get to the right person to handle whatever your email is related to. Big thing, which we saw today in one of our cases, the contact information, please, please, please go and update your contact information. It's super easy now. If you go on our website, there's a specific link on the right-hand side that takes you, straight to it. So be sure that you all are updating your address, your phone numbers, your emails, everything. Be sure and do that. It is a board rule. Another thing is for someone who is applying, be sure that you submit all documentation that is required that's outlined in board rule when you apply. When you have a deficiency, staff are going to email that to you, and it's going to delay the process. And when you send in that one document or the 3 things that you're missing, that process is going to start over every time. Not in a sense of, you know, all the way over, but they're going to have to start in the order that they receive that new documentation from you. So we have to be fair to everyone who's applying. And so if you submit something later, it's going to get back in queue for the next, you know, review time. A big thing that we're starting to see is sometimes we're getting, I guess people are really eager about getting their license. If you apply with your transcript and you do not have a conferred date, you are still in school, we will deny your application and you will have to reapply once you are eligible. So if you have not finished your degree, don't apply yet. Go ahead and finish everything. Make sure that you meet all of our requirements before you submit anything into us. Otherwise, renewals, same thing. Make sure that if you're selected for audit, you'll receive a letter in the mail. Make sure that you upload your documents, your CE documents. If you're not selected for audit, you don't need to send us anything. So make sure you're up to date on rules, sign up for email updates. That way you can be informed of everything going on. Pass the word. Like we said before, I think it was Ms. Stubblefield, we need to get more people out and on this and know what's going on. There's so many changes all the time. It's super important that we all work together, and this is our best way of getting that information out to you all. Right now, processing times, staff are working on July 24th for everything. That's for new applications, out-of-state applications, upgrades, and supervisor applications. So they're continuing to work hard with that. We receive a lot of applications in every week. So just make sure you send in everything that we need. Lastly, enforcement wise, we have 26 cases that are currently being monitored for compliance, and all 26 cases are in compliance at this time. And thank you, board members, for reviewing all the work. We had lots of material this time, so thank you all.
Thank you, Christina and staff, for all your hard work. I just wanted to comment on something you said about updating their information. And I know that the 36 people that are still here today, it's preaching to the choir, but just for the sake of hearing my own voice, I'll say it anyways. We have really, had an alarming increase of people not updating their information in the database. And, I know that we get overwhelmed with life events and we move and we have kids and we change careers. And I know that that's a struggle, but it's not an excuse. And we do have to get a hold of you from time to time. And I'm kind of beside myself with the number of complaints we've had recently where people just didn't show up. And then after a SOA hearing is issued, they all of a sudden say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know, nobody told me. And it's not an excuse, and it's just not going to be an excuse. So we just want to make that clear to everybody that please, it is your responsibility to update your information in the database. If you have friends or colleagues, let them know. If it's your birthday, go check out your license renewal and make sure your address is right. So please just double check that. Take a minute to do that today. Do it, once a year, every other year. Just make sure your suite number's correct. Make sure your email's correct, your phone number's correct, because staff desperately wants to get a hold of you from time to time. So please do that. The long and the short of it is that, once we go to SOA, if that's a revocation and you come back and you say, hey, wait, I didn't do it, or I have this evidence, it's done. It's done. At that point, we needed to get a hold of you. So please keep that updated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move into public comment. You have 3 minutes for public comment, and Patrick will monitor that time.
If you're interested in public comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom functions. Looks like we first have Angela Bowles.
Good morning, board. My name is Angela Bowles. I am a licensed professional counselor supervisor and the Texas Counseling Association liaison to the board. We appreciate the board for voting in favor of item 10A on today's agenda regarding PhD credentials. TCA supports licensees being able to use their highest level of education earned in counseling, and that their credentials should reflect that on their professional license. So thank you very much. Texas Counseling Association is looking forward to an exciting new year under the leadership of our new president, Dr. Catherine Bacon. TCA is also pleased to announce that we have a new CEO, Elka Gonzalez, who you will be meeting later today. If you have not already had the chance to meet her, perhaps the 67th annual TCA Professional Growth Conference in November 1st through 3rd in Houston would be a good time to do that. We would like to thank the board for confirming their presentation at the conference and look forward to seeing as many of you as possible there. As always, we would like to thank you for your dedicated volunteer service to our profession and to the citizens of the great state of Texas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
Next we have is Rhonda Kimball.
Good morning, all. Here's the lone voice in the wilderness. I absolutely oppose this PhD business. As I mentioned last time, it is not a requirement. And I'm so confused that you would put effort and money, even if you're asking for fees, into pandering to this ego of PhD, which is not required, and not check on somebody's probation. I'm so confused. How does PhD protect the public? It is not a requirement. Chairman, you want to celebrate people. You just celebrated Ms. Stubblefield, and that's wonderful. It's wonderful that you have these accomplishments. Does it need to be printed? And like Dr. Bradley said, give the PhD a $30,000 to $40,000 income advantage over us masters, you know, us lowly people working in the field. It's wrong. It has nothing to do with the board and protecting the public because it's not required. And it just seems really arrogant. And that's why you have only 50 people, LPCs, I'm an LPC, showing up at this meeting. I feel like I walked into the good old boys club. You already had this. Yeah, my eyebrows go up too, because you have the TCA wanting it, but you said you have only 3,000 PhDs, but 32,000 LPCs with masters. We don't need it. It gives a misrepresentation of one, expertise, because a PhD doesn't mean you are an expert, it means you like research. But there are experts that have master's degrees. Mine will be an EDD in community service and counseling. And I don't get that printed. Why would it be any different that you have a PhD and I have an EDD? Anyone who completes a doctoral program is a doctor. If it's a ministry doctorate in counseling, you know, I mean, if you're going to do one, you got to do the others, and that opens a legal can of worms, which is, I'm sure, why Patrick is doing a little raining on the parade. How can you show preferential treatment to someone who picks a PhD? What that says to me is you had opportunity, you had the disposable income. Most of these counselors don't. I love the two people that stepped up, cleaned up their act, and they want to go help people. They're getting a master's level. And to put undue burden on people that are helping this community is ridiculous. To even give the illusion that it's necessary is ridiculous. You have your diploma, you're celebrated. That's a personal achievement. It has nothing to do with professionalism. It has nothing to do with this board. And this is why you only have 50 LPCs showing up. I feel like my hands are tied in bureaucratic red tape. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kimball.
Next person we have is Diane Smedley.
Hello, good morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right. So good morning. We're still morning. Oh, 4 more minutes. Yes. Good morning, board members and staff. My name is Dr. Diane Smedley, and I am a licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, and a counselor educator. Additionally, I serve as the liaison to the LPC board for the Texas Association for Counselor Education and Supervision. Thank you for the opportunity to make public comment today. On behalf of TASIS, I want to thank the board for their recent due diligence with intentional rule changes such as those that you all adopted today regarding like informed consent and such. Changes such as these provide clarity and guard against misinformation, not only for the public, but I'm going to be honest, for my students and for licensees, the associates who are still learning this information and trying to access it more readily. Also, TASIS thanks the board for moving forward with the accurate representation of credentials on licenses. While it's true this benefits professional counselors in multiple ways, much like it was stated at the last meeting, this is ultimately a matter of public safety. The public stands to benefit from the transparency of differentiation between counseling and non-counseling related PhDs. And just to echo what Angela said, I am excited for everyone to meet TCA's new CEO, Elka Gonzalez. Recently, I had the pleasure of meeting her, and I'm excited about the unique qualities she brings with her and how those will benefit both the citizens and professional counselors of Texas. So with all that said, as always, I appreciate the board's time today, consideration of public comments, and service to Texas citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Elka.
Good. Okay, we're still morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elke Gonzalez, and I am, as they mentioned earlier, the new Chief Executive Officer for the Texas Counseling Association. I'm very excited to join the team and support TCA's mission to lead, advocate, educate, and advance the counseling profession. Our goal is to increase access to professional counselors and to promote wellness. And I absolutely look forward to engaging the board and staff and meeting you in person, if not before, but certainly at our upcoming Professional Growth Conference in Houston. So I'm so glad to hear that you all will be there. So it's a pleasure to see you all, and hopefully I will meet you in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have Dr. Lori Hollingsworth.
I guess it's still morning, 2 minutes. Good morning, Chair Harbour and board members. I am Dr. Lori Hollingsworth. I'm a licensed professional counselor and supervisor, and I currently serve as the president of the Texas Mental Health Counselors Association, also known as TMCA. Thank you for this opportunity for public comments. First, TMCA held its annual conference this past April, which was TMCA's first conference in the last 6 years. I want to acknowledge Dr. Loretta Bradley, who attended. We are grateful that she came and supported TMCA in getting back into the swing of having an annual conference. Also, she was kind enough to give a brief impromptu presentation on the recent changes in the breakdown of the minimum of the 24 hours of continuing education requirements for the LPCs renewing their license. So thank you, Dr. Bradley, and we hope that other board members will attend this coming April in 2024. And Chair Harbour, thank you for your report. I would like to echo your comment on the Interstate Counseling Compact. TMCA was disappointed that the Interstate Counseling Compact, especially Senate Bill 1100, was never heard or made its way out of the Health and Human Services Committee. Unfortunately, this leaves Texas as one of the only 2 southern states that are not part of the Interstate Counseling Compact. TMCA has continued to keep dialogue with the state legislatures to keep the momentum going and are actively working to advocate now for the preparation of the 2025 legislative season, and hopefully the passage of the Interstate Counseling Compact. TMCA would like to applaud and thank the board for considering allowing licensed professional counselors who have pursued and earned a PhD in counselor education and supervision to add this to their license. Here in Texas, there are skilled licensed professional counselors who did seek additional education in clinical skills, research, and supervision, and they choose to use this training in working with clients and patients, along with mentoring and supervising newly licensed and licensed professional associates in clinical and private practice settings. Yes, this does allow some counselors to maybe benefit from third-party payers. But more than anything, I think it sends a message that the counseling profession in Texas is equal to other mental health professions. And it's going to give the LPC board data of how many PhDs we have. And most of all, we are excited about having Elke Gonzalez here, the Chief Executive Officer of TCA, and we hope that y'all will get to meet her in person in November. Today, I just appreciate your time in serving the citizens of Texas, and thank you for considering all the public comments made today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hollingsworth.
Okay, looks like it.
Okay, thanks to everybody that participated in public comment today. Board, that wraps it up. As always, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for the time that you put in preparing for the meetings and committee meetings, representing us at association conventions. Thank you not only for just this time this morning, but all the additional work that you do, serving Texas LPCs, serving citizens of this great state. I need a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Dr. Amuna, and a second. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thanks, everybody. Take care. We will see you in October. All in favor of adjourning, please signify. And that's everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.